What's up and welcome back to the channel. The name is Ninja Knight. Make sure you like, share, subscribe and hit the notification bell up above for future uploads and check out the links posted down below. Thank you. So Manchester United beat Southampton yesterday 9-0 and this was something that I wanted to think about in terms of the game and not kind of come out with kind of snap ideas in relation to this one. I thought that this was a fantastic result and it's just a pity that the media's interpretation of this, particularly the people that were sitting in the studio at half time and at full time, were so negative about this result rather than saying, oh my god, we're after seeing an absolute thriller here in terms of we're after seeing 9 goals being scored, one of these records breaking type of matches. If Manchester United had been left off for another couple of seconds or another minute or so, I think it would have gotten into double digits and that would have been very exciting and absolutely delightful to see as a Manchester United fan. What I'm going to start off by saying though is big commiserations to Southampton. They're a club that are very likeable, and I have to say there's nobody at that club more likeable than their manager Ralph Hasenhüttl. And there's a lot of clubs that are out there particularly that I would have liked to see this type of scoreline be inflicted upon, and it's not Southampton because I really like Ralph Hasenhüttl as a person. He comes across really caring, he comes across really passionate and very emotional. I mean, even the interview with him after the game yesterday, he was absolutely shell-shocked. And it's kind of disappointing to see because he does come across as such a nice guy. I do think though, being the fact that he is a nice guy probably didn't help with this result, because I think that there was a number of things that Southampton did that was incorrect, and I've seen a lot of people levelling kind of accusations at VAR and VARs around the game, not with that scoreline. I mean, if you're a serious, credible individual, you're not thinking about VAR ruining the game on this one. I mean, there was a couple of absolutely ridiculous decisions from the Southampton players that inflicted this result, and I think there's no way of getting away from that. There's also the factor that when you're a manager, you have to look at game management and have to say to yourself, right, I'm down to 10 men with a very weak squad after 2 minutes, and then you're 2-0 down, 3-0 down, 4-0 down very quickly. At 1 or 2-0 down, what you have to do is you have to sit your players back, you have to play defensively, you have to park the bus, because if anything, if you've done your homework at Manchester United, and I'm saying this as a Manchester United fan, but if you do your homework against Manchester United, those teams that sit deep, United find it very difficult to break them down. I mean, look at what Sheffield United did. They just sat back and soaked up all the pressure and then they were able to move forward. I mean, this is the Manchester United team that's akin to what Arsene Wenger had with that unbelievable team that were able to just pick the locks of every defence that they played against with magical football. This isn't that type of team that can do that. I mean, there's some players there that are excellent players like Rio Ferdinand, Edinson Cavani, and then that's really about it in terms of creativity. I mean, coming from certain individuals, you're not going to get that really from Fred. It was a very good performance, I think, from Luke Shaw and Aaron Wan-Bissaka tonight, and obviously as well too Marcus Rashford, and all of the goal scorers, I would say, particularly Anthony Martial when he came on, played very well, I thought. But when you're looking at this as a whole, United are going to do something like this now to a top tier team. They're not going to absolutely go out and batter a top tier team like this. And like I said, it comes back down to game management from Southampton. They have to be looking, I would say the manager has to be looking at himself and saying, well, could I have done something? Could I have told the boys to stay back? There is a sort of admirability to going out on your shield the way they did, and they tried to play football, and I suppose that's something that can't be taken away from Hasenhüttl. You can say, well, look, we went out and played, we got beaten, we'll have to just pick ourselves up and go on from there. But then there's also the factor that you have some top professionals within that team. You have the likes of Danny Ings, for example. I mean, there's an in-game management system. If your manager is not making the calls on the sideline, it's up to you as a player then, and certainly as a senior player, not just Danny Ings, other players that are within that squad and that team, to tell the rest of them, here, listen, just sit back now, soak up the pressure and try, hold out for a while. That's not something they did. They just decided to keep playing openly, and United absolutely made a rout of it. I think it was fascinating stuff as well to see Robbie Savage and hear Robbie Savage within the commentary. I thought some of the stuff he was saying was absolutely spot on. I thought he was really, really good as a commentator, and I have to say, I'd love to hear him as a commentator well more than he is, because he was a breath of fresh air and he was very positive about United and he was very positive about the game, and he was like, this is great to see this, and that was really it. It's really nice to see that. Now, I know himself as a former Manchester United player, of course he's going to be sympathetic towards Manchester United, but when you look at certain individuals and listen to certain individuals like Jermaine Jenas and stuff, like fellas like that Kevin Kilban, another guy, that are just so anti-Manchester United, when you're listening to them, it's absolutely horrific. And then you see then at half time and full time the behaviour then sort of Rio Ferdinand. It's very strange the way they honed in on two kind of decisions within this game, and I thought that was personally, I think that was quite wrong, rather than celebrating the fact that United have come out with this wonderful result. So as far as Southampton are concerned, Alex Jankowicz now, I suppose he let the team down big time because it's 2 minutes in and he's made a massive error. It was a horrendous tackle, and I mean, it's a tackle that it could have been a career ender. When you're looking at that tackle as well, it's very high and it's very late. So whether it was intentional or not, I suppose it's up to the lad to say whether it was or not. But I was watching the match on a TV station that didn't have the fabricated crowd noise, and the screams from McTominay now were pretty graphic, to be honest. And I also would say then, I've heard those screams a couple of times on a pitch, and it's not nice, and usually it means that the guy isn't going to be standing up for quite a while. Luckily enough, though, McTominay was okay and he was able to play on, but I mean, even initially then when the camera zoomed in on the bruising that he had, it was fairly graphic in itself, and luckily he wasn't severely injured, and I'm really happy about that. Red card was absolutely a right decision, and quite a strange thing for this player to do then right in front of the touchline. I'm never condone on that type of tackle anyway, but he did it right in front of the touchline, and I think the manager just looked in disappointment. Now, I'm very aware of the fact that Ralph Hasenhüttl's Southampton are severely depleted in terms of a lot of injuries that are happening, and then a couple of problems that are happening within the club with purchasing players and stuff like that. So I am very sympathetic to him and to the club with that regard. But again, there's game management that has to happen within these games, and that comes from the manager and also the players. Players will also shirk responsibility. I mean, anybody with half a brain would say to you, alright, we're getting an absolute beating here now, we need to really fall back, we're 2-0 down now, it's 25 minutes in, this could get really bad. And I mean, that's the whole situation. If you're looking at it and saying to yourself, 25 minutes in, we're 2-0 down, we're down to 10 men, better sit in now and try and ride out this kind of absolute attacks now from United. But they didn't do that, and I think that's probably something that is to be credited in a way. I think a lot of people would probably say it's ridiculous, but I think when you're looking at the game, and as a football fan, when you're saying it's a free-flowing game, it is good to watch, and there's teams that I would love to see this result be inflicted upon, the likes of Burnley, particularly because there's a couple of players there that are totally unlikable along with the manager, and I would love to see them getting this type of whooping. But there's game management there from the players and the manager, which is, if we're taking a beating, we're going to go back and we're going to retreat and we're going to sit in, and that's just the way they are. And I mean, maybe if you're more astute or thinking about it like that as a manager, you might have said, well, how long we'll push back. But moving on then, I'm going to talk about a couple of the goals here. I think Aaron Wan-Bissaka was tremendous. It's something that's been levelled at him over the last couple of weeks, particularly his forward ability in terms of scoring goals, getting forward, getting crosses in. He does like to check back and pass back towards players in the middle. He doesn't like to take fellas on. Sometimes the first touch isn't great either, and I have to say, he was outstanding. The fact that he got the goal, I was absolutely delighted for him. And also then, I think he was a very heavy proponent in moving forward. I think Danny Ings found it a very big trouble to try and keep track of him, and he really did then for the first goal, because Bissaka got right past him and was able to score a very nice goal, a very nice touch. And I have to say, I was really delighted for him, because he's a guy that's after been going through a little bit over the last couple of months, and it's really nice to see him doing well and enjoying his football, and particularly because he'd been getting some criticism. I personally think it's quite unfair, because if he's a defender, he's there to defend first and foremost. He's not really there to be attacking, and I mean, that's where United fall down on the fact that they don't have wingers really at the club, or if they do have a winger, in my opinion, like Dan James, they won't play him. It's some strange stuff, there's some strange decisions going on at the club. But anyway, we'll progress. Marcus Rashford, I think Robbie Savage was really good in his commentary, I have to say, and he was really critical of Rashford and some of the decision making that Rashford was making early in the game. Now, Rashford's decision making as the game progressed got better, and I think it's something that maybe Rashford is overplayed at the moment, in terms of maybe he's feeling the effects of some sort of a knock or an injury, or maybe he's just creatively lacking at the minute, and that's something that has been often levelled at him. I mean, when you look at the age that he is, and he's after getting as many goals as Eric Cantona, I think he's after outscoring Eric Cantona. Now, Eric Cantona obviously had a lesser stint when you want to look at it, I suppose, at the club, and he is going to beat the record. And the record to look at now is Wayne Rooney's, really. I think to really cement himself as a top Manchester United legend would be to look at the Rooney record and try to get there. If he can get there, fantastic. It'd be great to see him do that as a Manchester United fan, and the type of guy he is. Like, he's a top class lad. But some of the decision making that he was making, I think Robbie Savage really did highlight, and it's something that's been a problem over the last couple of months. And at times he has been undroppable because there's nobody else. I mean, that's the way the club are at the moment. They just don't seem to want to drop certain individuals and try someone out because the individuals that are either behind them aren't good enough, or the club haven't bought in to actually challenge these guys. One thing I will say is Luke Shaw I'm not a big fan of Luke Shaw. I don't think he's the greatest crosser of a ball. I don't think he's the greatest passer of the ball, and I certainly don't think he's a good defender. But he has improved, and I think he's improved by the fact, and he has said it himself, that Alex Tellez has come into the club, and he's obviously watching Tellez and he's watching to see what he's doing. He obviously has a right full as well in Aaron Wan-Bissaka that he's looking at and saying, like, that guy's a top class defender, and he had to up his game. And to be fair to him, I will say, to be fair to him, he has. Is he the answer for the future? I don't think so. I think Alex Tellez is someone that I would love to see more. I think United could have had even more goals if Tellez was involved. I mean, his ability to cross a ball and pass a ball is unbelievable. And if he was playing with Cavani, like, there's no better man, I don't think, to ping out a pass there for Cavani onto his head. It's something I would like to see, and it's something that Ole Gunnar Solskjaer said in the interview afterwards. He was saying that they've been working on that type of crossing ability from the lads and getting it in quick, and I'm like, well, that's great, because that's something that has been lacking over the last couple of months, and particularly it's been very stagnant to look at when lads are checking in constantly rather than just whipping the ball into the big man and getting the heads in. That's something I definitely want to see. But yeah, I think Luke Shaw had a very good game yesterday, and I think himself, then, as a former player of Southampton, I think some of these players like to go back to these clubs, and they certainly like to say, look, we're after stepping up another gear, and I'm here, and here we go. So I have to say, really good performance for him. And then when you move on, then you look at the Jan Bednarek OG, unfortunate, but I mean, the cross that was put in was fantastic, and ultimately Fred was going to get on the end of it. I was a bit disappointed for Fred because Fred was right there, and if the ball had just flew across, he'd have been able to get a tap in, I think. And it'd been great for him because he's someone that's very enthusiastic. I absolutely love him as a player. I think he's wonderful. And I think that's one thing that you had to look at the game management from Solskjaer last night, was that whether he dropped Pogba or whether Pogba wasn't available, unbeknown, it definitely created more energy within the midfield, and I think it created more energy within the team, and that's something that has been lacking. When you're playing Matic and Pogba, they're slow to react to things. They don't want to be involved. They don't want to be in players' faces. They don't want to be energetic. They want to just kind of do their own thing and maybe have a couple of flicks and tricks and stuff, and it's not good enough. And I think it was good to not see Paul Pogba in the game last night, because I feel that, you know, it would have been slowed down. There would have been a bit of, I suppose, him wanting to hog the ball, and I don't think United probably wouldn't have got to the scoreline that they did. So I think that was a positive thing, that he was dropped for the game, or whether he was unavailable, it doesn't matter. I think the fact that United did so well without him was great, and I think that really cements then, hey, we actually don't need you. And I think that that's where the club needs to be at the moment. The club need to be able to say to players, we don't need you. Like, for example, they've moved Jesse Lingard on, we don't need you, out, gone, fantastic. And then there's a string of other guys that are there that have to be thinking the same, and should be thinking the same, because the club need to be very seriously challenging. I think that this is a big year for them to be challenging. So moving on, then you had Edinson Cavani, and I just have to say, I loved his reaction to the goal. I think the header that he scored was pretty incredible, and I have to say, I don't think it was highlighted enough, particularly at half time. I really don't. He put his hands on McTominay and told McTominay to move forward, push McTominay essentially forward, so that he would take the defender's eye line and would leave Cavani free. I mean, that is a brilliant piece of movement, and it's a brilliant piece of play from Cavani that got totally overlooked. I think it was wonderful, because the defender is thinking of McTominay running in from his left. He's not thinking of Edinson Cavani standing behind him, and Edinson scores a brilliant header. And like I'm saying, I think if you have Tellez crossing balls in like that constantly, Edison's going to score those type of goals easily. I love the celebration from him, the pure passion. I mean, there's nobody in the ground, no fans. This man is absolutely raring to go, and I love that. I have to say, like, that's something that's also been missing from Manchester United over the last couple of years. It's been brought in under Fernandes. Fernandes has brought in this enthusiasm, and Dan James as well too. When he scores goals absolutely mental. And so does Edinson Cavani, and I love to see that. I love to see that passion from a player. It's just something that I think really speaks to me as a fan. And also, I'm really looking forward to the fans getting back. And then I think the fans are going to love him. I mean, he's going to be one of those heroes, I think, because he's just everything that you would want in the Manchester United player. In ways, he kind of reminds me of Carlos Tevez in that he has this just total workhorse ability, and he's just so hard working up front. And it's another thing that Robbie Savage said. I mean, Robbie Savage, I think, said it maybe 5 or 6 times. He said he should be starting every game. If he's fit, get him up there. He's the best man. And I think in a way, Robbie was right, because as the game progressed, Martial did come on. He did score 2 goals. But Martial is too stagnant. He's too static as a player. And you need someone like Edinson Cavani that's going to take defenders with him. Open up your space for Marcus Rashford. Open up your space for the likes of Mason Greenwood. Open it up for Dan James and Bruno Fernandes. And Cavani's that type of guy. He's going to bring defenders with him. He's going to make those runs. He's going to make the runs in behind. He's going to make the runs and drag fellas with him. Whereas Martial's not like that. He's quite static. And for a guy of his age that's young, and Gary Neville touched on it in the last couple of weeks, they were saying that he's 15% fitter. And I mean, would anybody think that? If you looked at Martial on a pitch and compared it to Cavani, most people would think that Martial was the senior older player, because it looks like the legs just aren't there sometimes. He just doesn't want to run, doesn't get involved, and that involves then an attack then from the back. And I mean, your fourth line of defence is your forward players, and if they're not defending, forget about it. You're a man down then, and that's why I'm talking about the likes of Paul Pogba. Paul Pogba has no interest in defending. He's done a bit of defending over the last month. If he's giving United 45% extra than what he's doing, which is usually 0, I think he's done very well in comparison to what he has been doing. So I think that was good to see for Cavani. I was a bit disappointed to see him coming off at half time, but I do understand then from Solskjaer's point of view. He said he got a bit of a kick and on the ankle. We want to rest him. Game was more or less over at that point. So I can't really criticise that. I think Cavani could have scored a hat-trick pretty much in this game, and it would have been great to see. He was replaced then, and he brought on Anthony Martial, and I have to say, Anthony Martial took the 2 goals that he scored very well. Absolute brilliance, I think. And this is something that I want to see more of him for. Like, I mean, this is a guy I don't think that has been challenged over the last sort of year of been playing up front. I mean, he got a really good run on it last year. It didn't impress me. To me, the fact that they brought Cavani in said it all. It said that they needed somebody up front. They needed a senior player that was confident and had the ability, and his time was done. But Solskjaer seems to have this kind of want to constantly put him in and play him. It was right then this evening, because then he got the 2 goals and he did very well to score those 2 goals. I thought he took them very well, and he took them, I think, very skillfully, and that was something that's been lacking from him for a while. He was cool, calm, collected in front of the goal. Is he the type of player that's going to score those type of goals though if you're 0-0 or if you're 2-1 down? I suppose remains to be seen. It's great to do it when you're already putting a whooping down on another team, you know. So there is that kind of question mark surrounding him. Is he going to deal with in big moments? Is he going to be that game-winning player? Remains to be seen, I think. McTominay, after the early injury that he took, I have to say, we took the goal very, very well. It was a lovely strike from out long, and I have to say, I really was delighted for him. He's a guy that, you know, he embodies now everything that Manchester United should be. Hard worker, graft, determination, tough. He's shouting around him as well, which I like. He's also commanding that midfield. He's commanding the area around him. His passing ability is very, very good, and I like to see it, and I think he's one to keep an eye on. I think he's going to be a guy that's going to be a prominent member for the club for the next couple of years, essentially. I think he's going to be very, very good for the club. Moving on to Bruno Fernandes, and with the penalty incident. So this was something that they were talking about, particularly in the studio. And I'm going to talk about that now later on, because I want to kind of finish off on that point. But Bruno Fernandes took the penalty very well, and I was absolutely delighted for him. It's great to see, because he did everything in that game with the likes of assists other than score. So it was brilliant to see him score a penalty and get another goal under his belt. And I mean, what a man. He's a fantastic player. I absolutely love him, I do. And to me, I'd be making him Manchester United captain. It's unequivocal, I think, at this point. I think he's the man to do it. And he just lifts everybody around him, and the shouting, you know, talking to fellas in the tunnel beforehand, talking to fellas around the pitch. You can see him saying to them, make moves. It's fantastic. Going back on McTominay's goal though, I was delighted to see Donny van de Beek. He thought about touching it and then said, leave it, and then left it and then went into the goal. So fair play to Van de Beek there. He could have taken the ball on and tried a shot himself, but he left it and it flew in then, so fair play to him. Dan James came on, and I have to say I was thrilled to see him score a goal, because he's a guy I think that could have been utilised in the last couple of games, certainly with his pace. I mean, this guy is quick. You need to be playing balls down the channel and over the top, I think, for Dan James. I don't think he works in a game where you're passing balls around, you're static and you're waiting for things to happen. You need to be playing balls through to him over the top or down the line where he's going to get by fellas. I mean, the pace of this guy is frightening. I mean, he's as quick, I do understand, as Kylian Mbappe. Use him like that. I mean, to me, he's been a wasted talent at the moment. Like, if Rashford's having an off game, or Martial or Mason Greenwood, get them out there, get him on. And I mean, I know a lot of people are critical in terms of his final ball and delivery, but that's what coaches are supposed to be there for. They're supposed to be helping him on that. And are they really helping him? I don't know. I mean, that's something that I think that has to be looked at in terms of the club. Like, is there enough being done at the club in terms of coaching to be helping these guys with final balls and deliveries? Because, like I said earlier on, some of Bissaka's and certainly Shaw's crosses and all that are very wayward and not good. And I mean, that's something that the club need to work on big time, I think, because you can't just rely on the same one or two players, because if you stifle them, the jig is up. Like, it's an easy game then for the other team, and they work out who to stop. And I mean, when they stop that one individual, for example, it's very hard then for United to get going, because they don't have any other sort of plan, especially when a team sits back. So Dan James, very deft touch as well too, lovely touch, and then into the goal. Going back on the penalty incident, and this was something that was criticised heavily by the likes of Glenn Hoddle and Rio Ferdinand. I don't think they have a leg to stand on them in that one, and the reason I would give in terms of this is when Bednarek runs across, and they're talking about rules, and they're talking to Peter Walton as well, and I think Peter Walton was very interesting to say, and there's obviously some sort of problem between him and Ferdinand, because anytime Walton says something, Ferdinand's the complete opposite. And to me, Ferdinand as a defender should really know as well too that Bednarek had no intention of making a challenge for the ball. Unequivocally didn't have an interest. What he was hoping was that he was going to run along and he was going to hold the hands back, and that the man was going to fall over and say, well, it was unintentional. The fact that Bednarek ran into that position, he's already committing himself. And I mean, he's making the decision there at that point in time. Do I run after this guy and possibly clip him, or do we leave him go, and he's going to either fluff the chance, hit the keeper, or score the goal? And to me, Bednarek chose the option of, well, I'll try to take him out, and if I get away with it, great, that's fantastic. He didn't get away with it because he was the last man back, and I mean, it was very simple. And I think that the penalty that resulted from it was a fair penalty. He clearly clipped Martial. You can see the muscle rippling, and I don't care what anyone says. The muscle ripples, you hear him, clips him, goes down. Then BT then go into the conversation that Bednarek has as he's going off the pitch, and he says, Martial said it wasn't a foul. I mean, you can say what you want. I mean, Martial doesn't say it. It doesn't seem like he came out and said, yeah, it wasn't a foul. And I mean, most players, when they do get fouled or don't get fouled, they're not going to be putting the hand up and saying, oh yeah, that was 100% a foul. I mean, if you want to go back and say that, look at Thierry Henry, for example, with the handball incident. Said after the game, oh yeah, I did handle the ball. In the game, wasn't saying if it's going to your advantage, happy days. And I think anybody that had Bruno Fernandes, particularly as a football fancy captain, was probably delighted with the penalty as well. So I think when they're talking about VAR and they're saying, oh, it's ruining the game, and I'm seeing a couple of people, like of Matt Letitia, whether he was joking or not, because this is what an awful lot of the pundits wanted to hinge on, oh, the VAR in this game. Not at all. I mean, you're after being dealt a 9-0 whooping. That doesn't come from a VAR decision. That comes from a lot of bad play from the other team. I mean, if you want to look at it like that, that's one incident that's resulted in one goal. So if you want to say that wasn't a penalty and scratch that one off, that he doesn't get the penalty, it's still 8-0. That's the way I would be looking at it and say, well, you still after taking the whooping, 8-0. That's a problem. We should be looking at that. The fact is that whatever sort of stuff was going on in the BT studio, they wanted to constantly talk about how the VAR incident affected the game. I mean, look at the timing of it. I mean, it was 87th minute and he sent off, then Bednarek was sent off in the 86th. It had no burden on the game. The game was done. It was just adding another notch to the United belt at that point. And as a United fan, I was hoping they'd get up to the double digits of 10, personally. But I mean, they wanted to hinge this whole thing on VAR, and VAR's a problem, and we've seen a problem with David Luiz. Listen, in another game, David Luiz gets sent off. David Luiz knows what he's doing. He knows if he's running behind the player and the player clips and the player's going to go down. I mean, David Luiz is old enough and he's long enough in the game to know exactly what he's doing. And this sort of attitude from Rio Ferdinand of saying, "Oh yeah, well, like, I'd be disappointed with that and I'd be disgusted." But you know what you're doing. I mean, defenders know what they're doing when they're going to make a challenge like that. They know that there's a chance that the man will hit them and they'll go down. Look at some of the stuff that players have been up to over the last couple of years. The likes of leaving legs in when keepers are coming out to claim a ball and falling over them. That's going on. That's widespread. So if you're going to have an issue with that, and I think it was something that Peter Walton said, that the committees are looking at these type of incidents and saying, like, we're going to have to update the laws now to the technology that's being used. And that's fair enough. It's cut out an awful lot of messing, and I have to say, like, for me, if the shoe was on the other foot and that decision was given against Manchester United, I'd say, yeah, that's fair enough, because he was last man back. He took him out. He intended to do it. It wasn't an unfair and unjust thing, and that's really it. I don't think there's any complaints that can be had about that one, and particularly as so late in the game, it was irrelevant. Now, it's going to be relevant going forward because the player with the straight red card is going to be missing, then suspended for games, and so is the other fella, Alex Jankowicz, and rightly so, I think, especially for Jankowicz. But there is a sort of cynicism, in my opinion, to what Bednarek did. And the same thing with David Luiz, there is cynicism there. And that's something that has been in an Irish sport now, where they've introduced the black card, where someone will be essentially sin binned for 10 minutes for cynical play. Is that going to be something that they'll have to bring into soccer? I don't know. I think the fact that they have 2 cards at this time, the fact that fellas get away with tackles and certain tackles, and then there's no consistency in games, is certainly bothersome, because there's one tackle that's being made, it's a yellow card, there's another tackle that's being made, there's no card, or there's a red card, and there's zero consistency amongst what's going on. I had to say, though, it's great for referees in terms of they're able to just put the finger to the ear and say, yeah, we'll have a look at that again. And it takes that pressure, and I suppose that sort of abuse that's been directed at referees now. Now, it's already started today, because apparently, from what I understand, Southampton have asked for Mike Dean to never officiate a game belonging to them ever again. And I think that is entirely unfair, because there's certainly some bad referees out there. I particularly think Michael Oliver is one of the worst that's out there, and I think if it was Manchester United, I'd certainly be looking at saying, don't want Michael Oliver refereeing any of our games, because he's made some horrific decisions in the past. But like, Mike Dean is a character, 100%. But I mean, he gave out cards as well too last night that were justified. I mean, I think Maguire got a card last night, and it was like, well, bad tackle, bang, yellow card, that's it, done. And that was it. Maguire had a bit of a moan about it, but that was all. And I have to say, I think Mike Dean had a good game, and I think Graham Scott, I think, was the VAR official, and I think he had a good game. I don't think that there was a problem with either one, and I don't think people could complain, certainly about the penalty. If you've ran into the position, whether you're, I mean, you can say what you want in terms of whether he didn't mean to clip him or anything like that. The fact is, he ran into that position and he exposed himself to have that issue then, and that's the thing that I would be saying to Bednarek. I mean, there's no use in crying over spilt milk, but next time what you do is you either get the ball or you just leave it. And I mean, that's the way it's going, because in football now, it's becoming a sport now where it's nearly non-contact at times, because where you would have seen a cracking tackle beforehand or a 50-50 tackle and it's played on, you've guys then lying on the ground feigning injury, and it stops the game, it halts the game rather than the speed of the game. Another thing that I'd be saying now, and I know people that are soccer fans and football fans and absolute purists would hate this, but I think this whole offside thing needs to be scrapped. I think if they just scrap the offside rule, I know people are going to go absolutely mental at that and say, what are you talking about? I think you would have a more free-flowing game. I think you would also have a more higher scoring game. I mean, look at the Gaelic football that's played in Ireland, for example. There's no offsides in that, and there's a high scoring game. There's movement all the time, particularly, and you have to nearly man-mark guys, and it's then, one-on-one situations a lot of the time, and then players then are out to beat 1 man, 2 man, 3 men, and it's fantastic to watch. And I think that that's maybe something that soccer should look at, football should look at, because to me, like, the likes of the offside stuff now has gotten beyond the joke in terms of saying, well, he's off by his sleeve or something like that. And I mean, at that point, you're going to have to say, well, where does it end? So I think maybe, yes, absolutely look at the laws that have to do with offside. But I think when you're looking at a last man back situation on this one, and I don't think there's any sort of recourse on this, I don't think you can complain about that one personally. And that's just me. So again, like I said, I thought it was unusual to see Robbie Savage so positive in the commentary box. I thought it was fantastic. It was great to see and great to hear. Then you go back to Rio Ferdinand, and it's dour and dire. Like, it's really weird. Is Rio looking for a position within the club to be doing something there? I don't know. I mean, sometimes he comes across like someone that's unhappy that he hasn't been asked, and he comes across like he wants to be involved somewhere at some stage. But to me now, I was very happy with the result. I had to say a big commiserations, obviously, to Southampton. It's not nice as a club to be on the other end of this, but I think that there's an awful lot of blaming going on, and they're trying to direct blame, I suppose, at the referee. There's no blaming 8 of those goals. 8 of those goals are down to bad defending, bad game management, bad team management, I suppose, and then bad in-game management. I mean, there's a number of things there that Southampton as a club have to look at, rather than trying to blame other people. I think Manchester United had a fantastic result, and it's unfortunate that it does devolve into something that is quite negative, rather than saying like, this is unbelievable, this is great to see, and what a team. They've made a statement. They're second in the league now at the moment. They're behind Manchester City. It's tight now at the top, but what a result, and what a shockwave that might have sent out. But because it's Southampton, I suppose, and this has happened before, I think nobody's certainly surprised with some of the talent that United possess. Like I said, I think if this was a route against the likes of Arsenal or Burnley, or maybe even, I suppose, Liverpool, I think people would certainly be looking at this and saying, wow, what a result. But because it's Southampton, I think it's like, well, they were unlucky. I don't think so. I think they had 2 very justified red cards, a penalty that was justified against them, and then the remainder of the goals then comes down to bad defending. So it's all about accountability, and that's where I'm at on that one. Anyway, enjoyed the game. I hope Manchester United fans certainly enjoyed that one. I thought it was really exciting to see it. I'd like to see the shackles off the players, and they were running and going for it, because I think now that it's unfortunate in a way when you look at the last 2 games against Sheffield and then Arsenal, it felt like that the team had kind of shackled themselves and then decided not to go for things, and it's hurt them now. It's hurt them in the league chances, and then they can go out and do something like this. It's very irritating, and this is what Manchester United fans have been talking about inconsistency with the club. They go out and do something like this. Nobody knows what type of team's going to turn up on Tuesday or whenever they're playing next. Nobody knows what team's going to turn up in 2 weeks' time. And that's the problem with the club. You don't get a consistency. Like, you roll into this season going, right, Manchester City are going to be excellent. Oh, they've had a bit of a wobble. They've had some bad games. But overall, you look at that team and you say, well, there's enough character there. There's enough resilience there that team will be all right, and they are where they are. Look at Liverpool. Liverpool have had probably a very bad season. They've been hampered by injuries, and they're still in and about sniffing around. I mean, that comes down to good management. It also comes down to the team mentality. And I think that this is going to be a very good time for Manchester United. If they're going to win a league, it's certainly this year. I think if they decide to kick it on into next year, I don't think it's going to be happening, because if the rumours that be believed and Manchester City are going to pick up Lionel Messi, I think forget about it then for next year. Certainly, I think unless something radical happens in terms of Manchester United bringing Ronaldo or something like that, then you could say, well, the game is on now, so, and that looks unlikely now. I think that he might end up just going to Sporting Lisbon and play out the rest of the days there now if he decides to leave Juventus. But it's interesting stuff, and I have to say, Manchester United look good. Unfortunately, not going to be making any January signings, it seems, which is disappointing, because there's definitely an underbelly in the team there that's a little bit weak. I find that every January that there's maybe 2 purchases that could be made. They don't make it, and then by the time the summer rolls around, it's like, well, we gave it a shot. This is the time now where you should be looking and saying, right, we're going to put the press on Manchester City. Is this team going to be a one that's going to beat Manchester City? I don't think so. I think they're probably a centre half and a winger, at least one winger, short of seriously challenging this side of the year now. This is a big statement of intent, I think, with the 9-0, but I do think that they're lacking at least 2. Will they play Diallo? Be interesting to see. He's after getting 2 goals there in one of the under-23 games, which is brilliant to see. I would like to see that now. That's great to see him coming in and doing that. And they still have other players that are floating in and around that they've brought in, but haven't brought anywhere near the first team yet. Interesting to see what happens there. Anyway, I'm going to leave the video there. Drop a comment below. Make sure you like the video, share the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and I'll talk to you later. Good luck.